So tell me what came out of that? Just brief reports, and what did you manage to identify as cultural messages? Anybody?
So I had two things that came to my mind, two stories, and they weren't traditional fairy tales. Or, well, maybe one. One was about Peter Pan, and then the other one was about a more modern animated movie called Brave. And the sort of similarities for me between the two were that there was these two predominant characters who seemed to be trying to live out their life as a CAP. But then in Peter Pan, written many years ago, in the real world, it was shunned or frowned upon to live out as CAP. But yet in Never Never Land, it was was a wonderful, thriving community. And then in Brave, so another character living out as CAP, and then through demonstration gets acknowledgement, and then is accepted to live in that. So it was interesting to notice the sort of culture there of shun that, but then actually learning to accept that it is possible.
Thank you. Yeah, and interesting to look at the shift in the 100 years or more between Peter Pan and Brave. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Another group, Michelle.
Sorry, unmute. In our group, what was interesting that we picked up, and maybe I can share, is that my choice was Little Red Riding Hood and Kulshum, and we come from very different cultures. It's interesting that her stories were also, it wasn't a specific story that maybe we all know, but it was around what happens to naughty little girls if they don't, or children that don't do as they're told, or are being naughty, and that there was this threat, this theme of threat, that something bad will happen to you. Something, Kulshum's was something will be taken away from you, and mine was something, somebody will come and take you away.
Yeah.
Also had a version of. Whereas Alex's story was Noah, and his view of it was the cultural messages that he was looking at were more around hierarchy and royalty and what you have to be, and maybe rank in society, and the prince that saves the beautiful girl, and there were other things. And then we kind of found it interesting that the two women in our little group, the theme was about what happens to naughty little girls who don't do as told, and the parental message there above. Whereas from Alex's side, it was more about rank and where do you sit in the power. It was we found it interesting. We didn't have time to go more into it.
No, it's fascinating stuff, though, isn't it, when you start to explore it? Yeah, yeah. And, I was just thinking as you were talking about what happens to naughty little girls, that Marina Warner, who writes a lot about fairy stories, says that the stories were traditionally passed on in the household by grandmother, the old women sitting by the fire and telling stories to the children. So, this would be one way that message of be good, do as you're told, stay within the limits, don't get off the path. That's one of the ways that would be passed on to the little girls around her knee. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so there's that. So we've heard from two groups. So is there something from a third group? I've lost track of who was in which group. So
okay, we had two Cinderellas and one Hansel and Gretel,
right.
And noticed that there were also different cultural messages in there, and also noticed the one about hierarchy, like Alex said, about who belongs to what extent, and what what dictates the hierarchy, or what determines the hierarchy? Is it who are the real children of the mother and father, or is it age? Or but there was definitely something around hierarchy and who belongs to what extent, who gets to speak, who gets to be heard, that played quite a strong role for us. Yeah. Please add if I've forgotten anything.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so let's being the tutor, I always have to be keeping an eye on the time. So let's move on to the next bit, because there's some really interesting stuff in that, and we can take that a bit further by looking at perhaps how some of those messages get embedded in a model like the drama triangle. Now, I just show me if you're not familiar with the drama triangle. Anybody who doesn't know the drama triangle? Nobody. Good. Okay. I think for me, it's the main model that you can share with people who know nothing about TA, and it makes instant sense. And of course, you can then go on to teach TA and explore it much further. But I think the drama triangle always connects with people. I've had an idea for a while. I don't suppose I'll do it now because I've given up doing 101s, but an ideal way to start a 101, I think, is to just introduce the drama triangle and then let it all follow on from that. So maybe somebody will take me up on that idea. Okay, so, right. So thinking about the drama triangle. Just for yourself, just for a minute, think about a situation that you're involved in, probably a work situation, where the drama triangle could be a useful way of looking at what's going on. And just quickly make yourself some notes about it. You don't need to share them. It's just for your reference further on when we've done a bit more. So just a couple of minutes.
Trudi, could you repeat the question again? Just think about a situation where drama triangle
could be a useful way of looking at it. Something where you think there's something going on, but you haven't quite put your finger on it.
Okay.
So think about it in terms of the drama triangle and jot down some indications, whatever's useful to you.
I'm going to hide myself for a moment. I'm just running out to fetch a blanket. I'm freezing.
Oh, okay. It's fine.
Can I have a decaf, Jules?
I think I'd also like a decaf.
Yeah, I was just thinking, maybe David heard that downstairs and I'll get a coffee. And maybe not. Okay, so no need to share that. That's just for your own notes, which we might refer back to later on when we get there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is share a screen with you again and talk through a new model. Well, relatively new. Okay, share screen. Okay, this is the social roles triangle. Have any of you come across it before? Some of it Alex will have done, I'm sure. This comes from a French educational TSTA called Agnes Le Guernic. And I heard her talk about this in a conference many years ago in Paris in 2000. And I found it completely fascinating. Her idea is that the folk tales and fairy tales that we all hear as children are intended to convey social messages. That's the point of them. But underneath the drama of the story, such as what's his name, Steve Cartman, analysed in the Drama Triangle article, there are good intentions. And her idea is that we can look at the triangle from the point of view of what is beneficial here. And so she draws the triangle this way, with in place of persecutor, rescuer, victim, we've got the person at the center of the story, the hero, in the place where the victim would be. And that hero is also the beneficiary, the person who is being benefited by the help from the helper and guidance from, and as you will see, the guide and helper are in the places where we would normally put persecutor and rescuer. So her aim is to look at what were the positive intentions behind the motivation that we look at more superficially when we look at fairy stories, and what are the benefits to the growing child of these roles. And her thinking is, and I agree with her, that this triangle actually demonstrates something that is part of perfectly normal development. That as we're growing up, we are, of course, the hero of our own story, and we are guided and helped by the bigger people around us, whether it's parents or other relatives or older siblings. We need somebody who gives some structure to us and who advises us and tells us, and somebody who helps us in our development. And we need to be able to accept that and be the center of our own story. And as we grow, we learn to be a guide and a helper for younger siblings, or we might help mummy or offer our advice. And this is all perfectly normal part of developing. And just as on the drama triangle, we can all move around the drama triangle roles. As we grow, we learn, oh my goodness, thank you. I did get my coffee, thank you. As we grow, we learn to take on these different roles. And that's what should happen. It's how little human beings turn into big human beings, and with the ability to accept help and guidance from other people and to be a guider and a helper for other people. So that's what we can call normal development. And she calls this the social roles triangle because it's a big part of our social learning. So when we look at the drama triangle, I'm going to try scrolling down the screen. I hope this works for you. There we are. There's the drama triangle. It's if that normal development doesn't go well, if we don't receive adult guidance, but messages saying, do as I tell you, or if you do it differently from what I say, there's going to be trouble, then we might learn how to be a persecutor. Or if instead of being helped to do something for ourselves, it gets taken over and somebody else moves in as a rescuer and does it for us, then we might not develop our helping capacity in a positive way. So Agnes' idea is that when we look at the drama triangle, we're actually looking at a distortion of a normal process. And we can look behind the drama triangle to see what were the beneficial intentions at the time. Does that make sense? Please turn your mics on and comment.
Yes. Trudy, just wanted to ask, is social roles triangle the same as winner's triangle?
No, it isn't. Let's have a look at the winner's triangle. Good point, thank you. If we scroll down, we've got the winner's triangle at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay.
When we look at the winner's triangle, I think that they're similar, but they're starting from a different perspective. Agnes Lagernik is starting from a normal child development perspective. When we look at the winner's triangle, we're looking at what Steve Cartman himself calls the 10% okayness of the drama triangle. Because as you know, games are attempts at intimacy that go wrong. But there is a positive intention behind the game, and that's what we're looking at here. So on the winner's triangle, we're kind of looking at what is that positive intention, and how can we shift from the drama triangle onto the winner's triangle. So what are the strokes that are needed? But it's not but, it's and when we look at the social roles triangle, we're actually looking sort of further behind that into the developmental process. And that's the connection with the fairy tales. The winner's triangle, of course, is brilliant. But for the purposes of this morning, we're looking at the social roles triangle to look at how our thinking gets shaped by fairy tales when we're little, and how we can look at the positive parts of that rather than the oppressive parts. That's probably more of an answer than you were wanting.
Yes, thank you.
Is it okay? Sorry, I went on a bit
Yes.
about that.
Trudy, could I say something here?
Yeah.
For me, one of the most important aspects of fairy tales, despite all the negative messages, is that they give the child hope.
Yeah.
That even in a desperate situation that they might be in, one day something magical might happen to change that, and then they'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's why these tales are so potent in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right, and I think that very often there's a kind of tension in the story, because of course if we look at Little Red Riding Hood again, in the end it was okay. Nevertheless, there is that message in the story that people were talking about before of don't step off the path. This is what happens to girls who don't do as they're told. So the fairy tale is carrying both. Any other thoughts?
Trudy, are we going to go in the direction of having a look at the relationship between the social roles triangle and the CAP model?
Oh, what a good question. What do you think?
I'm hoping yes. My thoughts.
Tell us what you're thinking now, Alex. You don't have to wait for later. We can do it now.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed what Sharon said about something magical happening, and linking that to the cultural messages that I saw in Snow White. That something magical is often a reliance on somebody else who is perceived to be maybe more empowered or one up in the hierarchy. And I see that worldview as quite linked to the PAC model and symbiosis, where we're reliant on the parent or a parental figure to do things for us, and we lose our own or forget our own power and empowerment. So just in terms of the feeling that I get from the CAP model, there's more fluidity and power in it for me personally, and I link that to the fluidity in the social roles triangle, where we can happily occupy any position. So I would say my hunch is that the CAP model is more resonant with the social roles triangle, and the PAC model is more resonant with the KDT or Choi's winners triangle.
Great. Thank you. I really like your thinking. I think that's great. Any comments on what Alex has said?
Trudy, I am having a little bit of difficulty understanding it. So, and how can I use this model?
Okay.
The practicality of it. So are we saying that the hero I mean, I'm not quite sure even if I look at the CAP model, the child then is the child a hero, or is it a child a guide, or is the child a helper, or how? Where? All three.
Could be.
It could be.
All potential learning, how to be all of them, anyway, or all of them. You know, in a, what's the word you use? Alex said flexible, but like a dance, really, dancing around the roles. What I would say, Garima, is give it a few more minutes, because I'm kind of introducing you to the theory at the moment.
Okay.
I'm going to invite you both in the big group and in smaller groups to look at how you might apply this.
Okay.
So if you're happy to just sort of sit with it for a moment.
Sure.
I do realize that some of you have not done a lot of TA, and I'm kind of, I don't want to overwhelm you, and obviously this is fairly recent stuff, and it hasn't sort of gone out into the, well, I say fairly recent, it was published in 2004, but not everybody's caught up with it yet. So it's from the sort of developmental thinking that I keep hoping to promote in a positive way. So if you're happy to just sit with it for a moment, we will do some practical work in just in a couple of seconds. So just to check any other thoughts before I do actually, I think,
Trudy, I resonate with Alex's thinking, and something that struck me was maybe on a like a surface level glance at the three models. What I enjoy about the social roles is that the roles are they seem far closer to action. They're a bit more. There's a bit more character in them, which for me really connects with my sense of the CAP. And when I link it to my own learning journey of myself, I know that I'm quicker to action when I'm living more from my natural child.
Yeah, good thinking. Yeah. So, Andrea, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just to ask a question in response partly to what Garima said, are you even now beginning to see ways that you might be able to use this?
I don't have a sort of a thinking vision of it, but I have like this sort of stirring sensation of it.
Okay, like that.
I know it's maybe a bit of an abstract answer, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. Well, let's do something to maybe make it more concrete. And the first thing I'd like you to do is individually, each of you, to just spend a couple of minutes again thinking about times when, I wrote this down, but I might change it actually. Oh yeah, no, I just put examples of each corner. So yes, it could be in your learning, or it could be now. Just jot down for yourself times when you are in each of those roles of guide, helper, and hero. Okay. I'm going to... How extraordinary. A green line has appeared on the handout.
Sorry, Trudy, it's coming from me.
Oh, okay.
I was fiddling with the icons, and because I wanted to send you a message.
Okay.
And I got a green line instead.
Okay. Oh yeah, I see it. It's on the. Well, okay. Let's not worry about the green line. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'm sure you've all jotted it down, but I would like to see all your faces. That's better. Oh, Karen, hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
How long have you been?
Okay.
About 5 minutes. The tea party was a little bit delayed with the 90-year-olds, but it was lovely.
Okay, well, it's lovely to see you. And I guess you worked out where we've got to.
I'll slot in, yeah.
Yeah, fine.
I saw your last diagram and a few minutes.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to briefly explain what I want to do from now on, because you've all made your own notes, which you don't need to share unless you want to. And I'm proposing that we actually look at one fairy tale all together. And I'm going to ask Freeney if she's willing for us to look at Hansel and Gretel and for you and me to do it together, if that's okay. We're in the whole group. And then I'll ask you to go into threes or maybe twos, whatever, we'll decide at the time. And I'll give you a task to do in your small groups using this material, and then we'll come back together to look at the results. Is that okay? And part of that, Garima, will be looking at how we actually use this, or some possible ways of using this in the work that we do. So, okay to go on? Okay, so can we talk about Hansel and Gretel? Yes?
Yeah.
Mic on. Good. Okay. I think what I'd like to do is, if you're willing, Freeney, if you would tell the story, and I'll ask you some questions about it.
Do I tell the story from how I see it and relate to it, or just tell the story?
Tell the story in whatever way you want, actually. And I'll pick up on the bits that I want to relate to the triangle. But you, first of all, you tell the story for you.
Okay, so my recollection of the story and the impact on me was that there were a brother and sister who were walking through the forest and got lost, which I really resonated with, because I had a brother who I was very close to and felt very protective of. And in the story, there seems to be like something that's going to be really exciting and amazing when they see this house made of sweets. And I imagine that there's all this excitement about the sweet house and going and eating these sweets, and it feels almost like they never had sweets, so it would be something really amazing for them. And what connects for me is, growing up, my mom passed when I was very young, so it was very much a piece around sort of a rigid home, and we didn't get sweets except once a week, so it really was something amazing. But then also there was, coupled with that, a woman that lived in the house that I imagined could be this amazing welcoming woman to bring the children into her sweets and feed them and nourish them and give them something they didn't have. Which, it then turned out that wasn't actually the case, which also resonates a little bit with, some of my childhood experiences of wanting to cling to mother figures that also just didn't work out.
Thank you. So is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
I can see that for you, the important part of the story was focusing on the sweetie house, and that related to you and your brother and your own experience. If you think about the story and think about a little bit before that in the story, how did they come to be lost in the forest in the first place?
They were not directed and cared for. I actually don't know how they got lost, but that's the story I tell myself about the story.
Okay. So is it okay with you if I add a few bits from my own understanding of the story and see how that resonates or doesn't resonate for you?
Okay.
So the story of Hansel and Gretel starts from a poor family who don't have enough to eat. And sometimes it's the mother, sometimes it's the stepmother. It depends what version of the story you read. Says to her husband, "These children have to go because we can't afford to feed everybody." And so this guy who's a woodcutter takes the children out into the woods and leaves them there. But the first time they find their way back, and then he takes them again. And the second time they don't find their way back, and they find the sweetie house. And of course, they're really hungry by then, so it's amazing that they can start taking off the gingerbread and eating it. And then the old woman gets them inside, and at first she's very nice to them. And then after a while, she's not so nice to them, and she puts the little boy in a cage to fatten him up so that she can cook him and eat him. But the sister actually finds a way to delude the old woman into thinking that that she has to let little boy out of the cage. I've forgotten the exact details there. Maybe Freeney can remember them. And they escape. Does that make sense to you, or does that feel like a totally different story?
No, I remember it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I remember it. And what strikes me about why, and maybe I'm oversharing here, but actually what strikes me about why I don't remember the part about being left in the forest is because it just mortified me. And I don't remember that part of the story.
No. And are you okay talking about it now?
Yeah. No, I'm really good.
Okay.
I've worked this to death, so I'm
okay.
good hearing if everybody's a good hearing.
Okay. Because what I'd like to do now is to talk about that story from the point of view of the social roles triangle, and to think about the possible positive motivations. Because it's true that we very often think about the story as being about this wicked old woman in the forest who captures the children. And what we need to be thinking about, perhaps, is the other woman who actually pushed the kids out of the house and said, "You've got to go." And if we look at it in the context in which the story began, as far as we can see, it's a story that emerged from a time of really serious famine. It was known as the Great Famine in the German part of Europe, where a lot of these stories originated. And some families did have to make decisions about who would survive and who wouldn't, because there just was not enough food. And so if we look at this from the point of view of the mother, and possibly the stepmother, what she's saying is, you kids are quite big now, and there are smaller kids who I have to nurture, and you need to go out into the world and find your own way. So they're kind of literally pushed out of the door and into the forest to find their own way. And of course they do. They are not eaten by the old witch in the cottage. They are resourceful. They are clever. They do have brilliant ideas about how to get the witch to think that the little boy is too thin to eat or whatever it is, and escape. So although the mother seems very cruel to be pushing the kids out and saying, "I can't feed you anymore, you have to look after yourselves," actually she's right. The kids are big enough, because in the circumstances that they find themselves in, they do find a way round, and they do actually manage to control their own environment and find a way to succeed. Does that make it sound different?
Yes, very different.
Let's have your response first, Freeney. What effect does that have on you?
I noticed the resistance initially to even consider it, and then noticed how resistant I am, and so settled into just listening to the possible intention that could be good, and then realizing that when you said resourceful and brilliant at getting the witch to actually to manipulate the witch as such, I guess what is landing for me is again the story I told myself about the story, and how amazing it would be. And I immediately started thinking of the situation I wrote down and how to switch that around and how that could be.
Really?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Good. So this is beginning to generate some ideas. Okay. Again, I'm keeping an eye on the time. So is it okay if you go into your small groups now and do some work together? What do you want to do, pairs or threes? We can do either. Any thoughts? Nobody minds?
In terms of numbers, I think pairs works better.
Okay, let's do pairs. If you're happy to organise that, Alex, and nobody else is shaking their heads or doing thumbs down or anything. So let's work in pairs. Okay, so let me give you the task. So you will need, or you might want to, let me not say you will need, it might be helpful for you to think about the drama triangle situation that you made some notes about earlier, and your own experience of being a guide, a helper, and a hero. And then in your groups, try thinking through each of your drama triangle situations in terms of the social roles triangle. Sharon? Mike?
Trudy, I just wanted to ask you, could you just explain a bit more what the guide and the helper are? I understand about the hero and the beneficiary.
Okay. The guide is a person who, I tell you in French, because of course Agnes is French and this was originally written in French. In French, the word is mandateur and it's untranslatable. But I did speak with a bilingual person about it who said the closest she can get is stimulator, which isn't a word that we use in English, but it does give you the idea. The guide is the person who actually initiates, who makes things happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you think in terms of an older child, the guide might be saying, you know, let's play something or other, and I'll be the prince and you be the witch, and actually getting things. It's the person who gets things going.
Okay.
And the helper is what it says, donneur in French. It's the person who is actually there to support, nurture, encourage, and enable, I suppose.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good enough?
Yeah.
Okay, so is the task clear that you're going to try applying the social roles model to the situations that you've identified on the drama triangle? And see, and I suppose the extra bit of that is see how that might inform what you do in the future. Is everybody okay with that? Say if you're not, or if you've got any questions. Some people are looking very thoughtful, probably because you've started working already. So let's go into pairs and do it. Now, let me see. If I give you 10 minutes for that, and then we'll come back together and share our thinking. Okay, when you're ready, Alex.
Okay, I'll send you an invite to each of the rooms.
We all here? Yes. Great. Okay, so any thoughts? Who would like to tell us what you discovered?
Sure.
You can go ahead, Alex, if you want to.
No, please take the floor.
Okay. What came out of this exercise for me is that you can turn a very negative situation into a positive one, where you remove yourself from the game and you start behaving in a more productive way, so that you become a beneficiary instead of a victim. And that was very interesting for me.
Great. Okay. Do you want to tell us any more, or is it enough to just give us that summary?
Well, the same thing happened for both of us.
Oh, great.
But it happened in different ways.
Okay.
Because we had different roles in the drama triangle to start off with.
Right. That sounds like good discovery.
Okay.
Alex.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. I explored the narrative using the drama triangle, and then again, this time replacing the drama triangle roles with the social roles terms. And I found the word stimulator and initiator really gave me an aha moment, because I noticed there was competition for that role. And then Karen suggested the possibility that because of that competition for the social roles triangle position of guide or stimulator, we hopped back onto the drama triangle.
Ah, right.
And so then I also noticed, just thinking theoretically about the drama triangle, a resistance to wanting to go to any of the roles because they're all negative roles. And using the social roles triangle, feeling greater potential for compromise going into another role to avoid the competition.
Gosh, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, love to hear more, but I know we can't. Okay, somebody else, another pair. Thoughts?
I just unmuted myself and forgot what I wanted to say at the same time.
Okay. Is it coming back?
Maybe I'll just off the cuff. What I realized, we noticed working with Anand is and it resonates with what was said earlier about looking at a situation through the roles, the social roles. It's enabled to see it in a more positive light, and linking in with my growing sense of the roles being closer to action, sort of enabling a sense of being enabled in a moment that is potentially a game, or being on the drama triangle, of course. So that was the one thing, and then my another sense was when I was reflecting on my drama triangle example. When I started to look at where I was, the sense was that I was stepping into a victim role, it's a victim space. When I changed it to look at it through a hero or beneficiary role, how my resourcefulness came back in that moment, and then got really excited at the idea of being able to then be fluid and dance through the roles in that situation as appropriate.
Thank you. And I suppose we need to remember as we do this, that if we see something differently, hopefully it will enable other people involved to see it differently too. And we do need to remember that sometimes people are quite invested in the games that they play. And so it might not be straightforward. And it's a first step. in fact, it's an enormous step. It doesn't sound enough to say it's the first step. It's an enormous step for us to find a different way of looking at our own behavior and our own feelings, and that's the beginning of change. Okay. Anything else to share, or any questions, or anything that you weren't sure about? Please share anything.
Can I ask a question about something you've just said, not to change the subject, so if I'm off topic? So you just mentioned bearing in mind that other people are invested in the game. So if that is the situation, does one...
Good question.
What do you do?
Exactly, good question, and thank you for raising that, because I realise I haven't said anything about that. About my own experience of actually using this material. One thing that you can do, if it's appropriate in the situation, is to actually teach the social roles triangle. And again, like the drama triangle, it doesn't need to be surrounded by massive amounts of TA, because it's, especially if people are already familiar with the drama triangle as a way of looking at a difficult situation, the social roles triangle can be really enabling in moving out, in inviting people to look at the positive motivation. Is that answering your question? It probably isn't. You said, what do you do? And I was really, what I'm saying is, one thing that you can do is actually share this with somebody.
Yeah, I did hear that piece. I'm just thinking, if it's not in a relationship where that's a possibility, and what you're trying to do is in your own life or a scenario, shift a role or a situation, and the other person continues to play the game. So, you know, the victim particularly, I'm thinking of in this situation, I could stop being the persecutor, but they could remain the victim and keep playing the game. You know, I was just wondering, even if I explain, you know, I don't want to be the persecutor, you know, and I can't even identify, obviously, that the person's playing the victim, but I'm just wondering if there's a model or a way or something I could do, or that one could do to bring awareness or shift it another way, so that the game doesn't continue.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Out of the game.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know,
No, it's a good idea to keep that question in mind, because I think that's what I was hinting at in response to Andrew, that we need to account for the fact that the other person might not know how to shift, and they might at a particular point feel they don't even want to, so they're not ready to move on. And I guess, well, one answer is continually inviting people into adult, whether that means confrontation, like you don't seem to want to make any changes in this situation, or whether it's more sympathetic, like, can you tell me about how this feels for you, or any of those questions which are actually, rather than supporting their position, asking them to explore it. I don't, by support, I mean embedding, you know, embedding the negative position. Inviting them to explore it, either by challenging them or by simply trying to open up the discussion. And
can I add a piece, Trudy? It came out of our discussion in my pair, and it's something that I often fall back on is the sense of contracting, in maybe recalibrating what's the best shared desired outcome. Are we still both on the same page, as it were? And how are we doing to get there? Is our way of being serving that? And do we want to change if it's not? But it make explicit what are we here for?
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for all of that. I think this is a really interesting conversation. So I'd like to add one piece that we spoke about in our little group, in our pair, and that was around what's actually the difference between the drama triangle and the social roles triangle. And what stood out for us was that it's actually our behavior. So are we doing the effective or are we doing the ineffective? So if we look at the functional ego states model or the functional fluency model, it would be that difference between operating from the ineffective adult states. So instead of doing the dominating and the marshmallowing, if we do the nurturing and the structuring,
Absolutely.
that is the more helpful, and that's what we can work on. And that invites the other person also to step out of the ineffective and more into the effective, because we can't actually change what the other person does, but the biggest impact that we have is working on our own behavior and concentrating on being effective with that.
Yeah, great. You're right. Absolutely. And I guess this is what this whole, well, certainly this webinar and a lot of work that's going on in TA at the moment is about is let's look at the resources, let's look at the positives. Because we have lots of resources, and we have an incredibly fertile and robust system in TA. So, how can we enhance it by sticking with the positive? I'm very aware of the time, because we didn't make any contract about whether we finish promptly or whether we can go on a few more minutes. So I would like to take a few minutes for sort of finishing up. Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
I'm going to go 12, but that's fine.
Okay. So if people need to disappear, just slip away. But before we do, let's just maybe have a quick round of what you're taking away from this. And why don't you start? Because if you're going to slip away.
Okay. Thanks. For me, it has the role of a refresher and an inspiration, which is what I find in this kind of engagements. So it did fulfill that role for me today, reminding me again of the usefulness of applying TA in various ways, particularly the drama triangle, and how to actually apply it in a different way. I found it particularly useful in the last piece when I had Garima as my partner, to actually work on a real life situation. I found that really useful, and thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Someone else?
I'd like to go next. For me, I really also enjoyed how you pulled the whole thing together at the end, because it's a very practical and it's a direction that I'm moving in anyway. And this has given me some practical skills and ways of working that I can actually use. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sharon. Okay.
Thank you.
For me, it's just maybe thinking about this social roles model, which this is the first time I'm hearing about it, and trying to understand how I can actually apply it. And I think the two things that kind of stand out for me with all this discussion is when we look at this, we think of the persecutor with it's more in competition if you're looking at a situation, and how you can be the initiator or stimulator, and it's not about being in one role, it's about jumping and and looking at our own behavior. How do we change, how can we be all of those three roles rather than being the persecutor and then doing the other roles. So So this was great. Thank you.
Good. Okay. And that just prompts me to say, which I need to check with Alex, if I was to send a handout with a kind of summary of some of the thinking about the social roles triangle, can you then pass it on to everyone?
Happily.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. It might not be instant, but I will do it. Okay.
So for me, it was a food for thought, and like I started saying that it's so, as TA rightly says, it's a social form of psychology. These social roles made a lot of difference in understanding and how to look at things in a different aspect, and an evolving medium of the PAC model, the CAP1, which was like, it was breathtaking for me to look at it that way, because we are not used to see it. We look at it the traditional concept. So a lot of new things, and to be more open to see how it's evolving over the period of time. So thank you so much. And as it was mentioned that it would be experiential, it did make a lot of sense to fill in and see how it works and what works. So thank you so much, Trudi.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Are you all being polite, or have we run out of things to say?
I can go next.
Okay.
I very grateful for the sharing in the group. I mean, this is all so new to me. I felt like I needed to be sort of Googling half the stuff as I was listening to. So that was lovely. And I feel that for now, the application is predominantly personally, because until, it's been personally embedded, applying it to my clients or to, any workshops would be more difficult. So the last piece about really understanding application really resonated for me. So thank you very much.
Good. Nice to work with you on the story too. Thank you. Yeah.
Trudi, for myself, the workshop was amazing. I like the way you presented it. You introduced the topic and gently brought to that place of liberation, which is where we started with the CAP model. And the workshop was definitely an indication of how you co-created that atmosphere. So much learning. And I was introduced to the social model for the first time: guide, helper, and the hero and beneficiary. It is absolutely liberating, coming from that very constricted place and not knowing, especially having returned to India and living for the last 4 years here, the cultural hierarchy and how it is playing out in my work area. Now I can be there, and even if I get stuck in somebody else's in a triangle and don't want to contract, I can say, who is benefiting? I can ask questions and move out into that adult integrated state, and it's so freeing. So thank you.
Lovely feedback. Thank you. That's really, really what I like to hear. Thank you.
I resonate with a lot of what's been said in people's checking out. I think this has really highlighted an additional awareness on my own personal journey of living into the more of a CAP and permissions around that, and really excited to think more about myself with this social roles triangle, to really get my mind around it, my mind and my gut mind around it, before I start testing it out with some people. So thank you. This time's been wonderful.
Thank you. Okay. Are we done?
Thank you that Trudi, you were happy that I could join when I had my other commitments. I've met this model a few times, and the new thinking for me is I'm realizing that I'm probably more practiced and comfortable in the role of guide and helper, but not so much as beneficiary. And it's probably really come up to me because my mom at 90 very much is now in that beneficiary role, and I need to be doing both the guide and the helper. And I'm thinking I want to reflect more on how is it for me to also welcome being in that role, and how would that look. So thank you for that.
Good. Because I remember you said you didn't feel you'd really got it when you talked about it before. So so this has helped to get it. Yeah.
Thank you, indeed.
Yeah. Okay. Done. Wow.
Thank you from me too. I thought this is really, really good thinking and good stories. I really enjoyed the story parts. So those fairy tales and the actual drama, and then looking at that with the drama triangle, which is our natural tendency. Yes, there's a persecutor, there's a rescuer, there's a victim, but then helping us shift from that to, well, but what else is it? Is it just this negative triangle? To look at the positive, the functional triangle, and start thinking about how do we shift to that in the other stories, in the normal stories of our lives. I thought that was a really, really nice process that I think will continue working in me for a while. So, yeah.
Great. Lovely. Thank you. Wow. Well, I enjoyed myself. I really did. And thank you all for your contributions and for your willingness to participate at such a level. It was really lovely.
Trudy, lovely to have been part of the webinar with you, and thanks so much for the opportunity and the time. I enjoyed the learning very much as well, and particularly how the social roles triangle can help to reframe a narrative and look at potential other ways of being with other people. So on behalf of all of us as participants and the SATAA, thank you so much, and we hope to be working with you again very soon.
That would be great. Yes, thank you. Well, thank you all, and have a good day or a good night, depending on where you are in the world.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.